Clarence, I think I think you sent us more health data that I maybe have ever seen in, in my entire life.
Welcome to my world, Jeff.
Yeah. It's I thought, holy cow, it was good stuff though. But in fact, I enjoyed studying.
Okay, I think we are at 7 o'clock. We do have quorum, so we will call this special meeting of the Easton Board of Education to order at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, December 16th, 2020. Members in attendance, I see Jenny coming in too. Good. Members in attendance, Jeff Parker, Randy Hicks, Gretchen Goldstein. There we go. And Devin's coming in right now as well. Perfect. Sorry, Gretchen Goldstein, Jenny Cheetah, and Devin Weibel, as well as myself. That will take us to the first agenda item, which is board member comment. Any board members have any comments as we kick off? Yep, go ahead, Jeff.
Just thanking Clarence and Vicky and Rydell for cobbling together all this information. It was, I know it was a yeoman's task, and really do appreciate their time in getting that done.
Hear, hear. Any other board member comment? Okay, that takes us to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Please.
Add something.
Sure.
Is it okay if it's not specific to the agenda?
I don't think that board member comment can be constrained to the agenda. I think we can't dive in to discuss it, but certainly I think board member comment can be on whatever topic you choose.
Okay. Then I am going to take a minute for a snow day lobby pitch. I've shared some of the reasoning with Rydell already, but added a few concerns to kind of beef up the argument, and I will read as quickly as possible and then just send it via email. I wanted to start by recognizing that board and community members have expressed concerns about instructional time, and that a snowstorm in 2020 presents an opportunity for more school hours. I also want to recognize the concerns at the high school level for progress in AP and other college preparatory courses, but here is a list of howevers. This time of year is typically filled with interruptions, holiday concerts, class parties, crafts, hunting for gingerbread men. Teachers often plan more project-like work at this time of year because everyone is tired and distracted by the upcoming holidays. The school year has a natural ebb and flow of intensity and focus that is lost in distance learning. Days at home present a relentless schedule for everyone involved. Teachers naturally know when to push and when to ease up when they have their students with them each day. Even a high school teacher will put on a movie and have a hot chocolate day every once in a while, but under the scrutiny of being on camera and the challenges of remote learning, teachers are hesitant to miss a minute of time lest they be criticized. Our kids and teachers are working harder than ever before, and frankly, it's time for a little break. As far as instructional time, I would argue a day in the spring, hopefully back in school and in a less worrisome atmosphere, the hours will be more valuable. This is also a prime example of putting mental health first, a decision that has no downside. As a logistical concern, there are faculty that have been teaching for school so they don't have to recreate the classroom environment from home. We would be asking them to make yet another pivot in their instructional model for one day. Parents of children who go to school in other districts who do have a snow day will have to try to reach all kids, to teach all day with their kids unattended. And if for no other reason but the absolutely needed joy of a snow day right now, Dr. Harrison, you are the snow day. You are the snow day guy. Put on the music and let them play. Please don't worry about losing academic gains tomorrow. I assure you much more will be gained by all and will reap rewards in the end with a Zoom-free, go outside and build a snowman day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other board member comment? I've got a couple of things. Just to sort of tag on to your comments, Jenny. I think you're right. Like the sort of opposing forces of these two things that we've been saying and the unbelievable pressures that we're all under. I want to just say to Dr. Harrison, I know it's a very darned if you do, darned if you don't kind of scenario. I will say, for my part, we plan to send a couple of very polite emails tomorrow for a couple of classes. And we're going to say, sorry, we're going to miss your class today. I know you can either approve or deny that as a responsible administrator, but we're gonna hope that our teachers aren't gonna whack our guys on the knuckles too hard, and I don't think that they will. We're gonna take off a couple hours tomorrow and play in the snow, because I agree, Jenny, we need it. I need it. I'm that dad who's going to be out there throwing pretty hard snowballs at the kids, and I think they're at the age now where they can take it. So agreed. We all need to exhale a bit. I hope we can sort of thread the needle with those who want the time are going to be able to do that, and those who want to sort of have the instruction will be able to do that. So anyways, so the other comment I want to make is just, what is the point of this meeting? Right. I know we all are slammed. I want to make sure, from my perspective, and certainly all the other board members can chime in. I'm sure that we'll hear from Dr. Harrison and from Clarence tonight. The point for me is that we have a very clear statement of what are our obligations for next year, and how does that impact the overall budget that we plan to put forward. Where, because of contracts, whether we're talking about teacher contracts or para contracts or administrator contracts, any of those, or we're talking about the piece of the budget that is our healthcare obligations, or we're talking about our obligations for contracts to the bus companies or anywhere else where we have signed something and committed, and that locks us in. What percentage of the overall budget are we locked into? And so this conversation, honestly, this meeting could last 30 minutes or maybe an hour. I really hope this doesn't take longer than an hour, but I hope we are able to clearly articulate, here are the places in the budget for next year where we have obligations that we have very little discretion over. And so that helps to set up and to state publicly, this is being recorded and this is live out on YouTube, so we can point to our partners in the Board of Finance and all of our citizens of the town to say, this is exactly why we are sort of constructing the budget in the way that we are. So with that, I think we'll, unless there's any additional board member comment, I think we can move on to discussion and possible action. Okay, that takes us to 3A, discussion and possible action, Board of E, spending obligations overview, contracts and healthcare highlighted. I'll turn that over to you, to Mr. Zachary and Dr. Harrison.
Right, you want to take the lead since you have the updated chart?
Sure. So I just want to start us off in this discussion. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. I want to take a moment, and Jenny's not playing fair by bringing her children into the camera view. It's tugging at my heartstrings.
They wanted to actually ask you if they could have tomorrow, but I told them I had to go brush.
Unfair. I'm going to share my screen just for a moment to sort of take us back to earlier discussions about the budget process. And so just as a reminder, we talked about this at a meeting, I think at last month's meeting, just looking at the budget process over the course of the next several months. Here we are in December talking about contracts and healthcare. In January, we'll be talking about positions and programs, just some of those, some of the new ideas, understanding that tonight will really frame the level of flexibility that we have given the contractual obligations that we already have in place. And then in February, the complete budget review, and then in March, submitting. And so just want to take a moment, and we'll hone in on December in contracts and healthcare in just a second. And just board members, just so that you know, as we're considering positions and programs, we're really looking at this and how it ties back to our overarching ABC goals. And so we've started that conversation. I think that as John mentioned, tonight really is a good opportunity for us to really look at what those obligations are. And, you know, we could use some of this time to sort of give a nod to some of the things that we'll talk about in January, but I want to be conscious to make sure that we allow enough time for this discussion. So board members, I know that you received this. I just took some of the information that Clarence sent, and it was, he sent a lot of numbers for us to review that really is helping us frame the discussion. I didn't put all of them on a slide, but wanted to at least kind of have this as a visual for us to discuss and really look at, of the 100% of our total budget, what percent of it is essentially already spoken for. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Clarence so that he could talk us through this information and then move on to the other pieces of information that was shared.
Thank you, Rydell. Just sort of lay the framework. My understanding of my task is sort of account for things that are already spoken for. So what I've done is I looked at our current budget for this year and went through the things that I think from a finance professional that I know year in, year out have to be paid for. There's not much discretion in whether it's a contract or not. It's just, you really don't have much say in this. So I went through the budget object summary report and found the things I thought were sort of non-negotiable. So what I've laid out here is these broad categories from this current budget year, sum those totals up and took the percentages of our overall total budget. It works out to be 94.43%. So just keep, salaries are sort of self-explanatory, transportation self-explanatory, health insurance, substitutes, life insurance. We have our Social Security and Medicare payments. We have our other professional services, which typically are SPED related. We have our utilities. People don't think about utilities, but if we don't have the lights on or heat on, school's not gonna be much function. We have our private school tuition, which is typically SPED. We have managed school tuition. It isn't a big thing, but we have an obligation to pay it. We don't have much say that. And then there's a central office allocation. So that works out to be $16 million for this year's budget. And our overall budget is slightly over 17 million. So you're looking at the order of magnitude of 94.43%. So if you look at the three big ticket items of salaries, transportation, health insurance, that's almost 82% of the overall budget is spoken for, you know, before you even get out the gate. So then what we did is, per your request, we looked at what our projection for the salaries for next fiscal year based on the recently signed contracts. So the contractual salary increases and all the other, whether it be longevity, clothing allowance, whatever the case may be, works out to be $10.6 million for next year, assuming status quo, no new positions are added. It's just as it is today, people with step increase or GWI, whatever the case may be. That's a $326,000 change over this year. The bus contract has an additional $24,000 increase, so it's a 3.1% increase there. The health insurance, we're using the number that Brown & Brown has a projection. Now, we don't have to follow that number, but that's the one number we have now. We're going to get a different number from Anthem in the near future. The numbers from Brown & Brown came last week, so that's the number we're having to go with. So either way, that number can have some variability in what we decide to put there, but using our consultant's number of $2.8 million, that's an additional $265,000 rounded. So the point that we're trying to get across here is 80% of our budget, or 82, rounding 82%, is addressed by these three major categories. And those three major categories on these facts is having an additional almost $600,000 increase based on either contracts or projections from our consultants. So it leaves very little wiggle room, so to speak, for things that are at our discretion. And what you don't see on here are textbooks, periodicals, some other smaller contracts we'll show on another slide, but it's really sort of trying to drive home the point that the vast majority of our budget is essentially spoken for before we even spend $1. So that was the sort of point of this, and I'll leave it to you up for some questions. Then we'll go to some other slides after that. If you have some questions about that,
Rydell, could we stay on that slide for a second? I think I mean, at least for me, I think it's useful in the discussion. I don't know if anybody else. Yeah. Okay. So I think, first off, thank you very much. I think putting it this way, I ask for, and that's how you know you're working with true professionals is they know what you meant. All right. So I said salaries and healthcare, and you said what you mean is all the stuff we're pretty much locked into, and especially you look at the 81.74% for sort of what I asked for, and now tuition private school 1.36%. Like that's not very optional, right? The professional services, the utilities, not very optional. The sort of 2.59%, add another 2.61% at I see exactly how you got to that 94. So that's actually very, very helpful that you did that. Does anyone have questions for Clarence while we're on this page, or do we want to pivot to some of the other presentations?
Well, there's a number of questions that I sent to Clarence this afternoon. Clarence, you want me to go through them one by one, or how do you want to work?
Jeff, can I ask you to wait, because we're going to do the individual slides that you base your questions on. So when we get to those, I think it'd be probably more appropriate to ask them then.
Perfect. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions while we're here on this slide? And we can give everyone a moment to digest. I get there's a lot here.
John, just to ask if the presentation slides could be sent in an email. So that we
Absolutely.
Can,
yeah. Yes, please.
Adele, do you want to finish with your slides, or you want me to go on to continue with mine?
No, I'd like for you to pivot over to yours. So the rest of my slides are more about the January conversation.
Okay. So if I could have the ability to host and.
Yep. You should be able to share your screen now.
All right. So let me move this over here. Sorry, I'm dealing with a dual screen here. All right, there we go. All right, can you all see that?
Yes, sir.
All right, this is basically what you just saw from Rydell. What's additional here is the account number. So if anyone was curious about where we got it from, those are the exact accounts you can pull it into. So we're going to go now diving down some of the detail of how we got here. So you all should have gotten this and now an updated version of this. We had an additional requested position that wasn't on the original sheet you received that happened in a budget meeting subsequent to the original forms. We updated it today. One of our building leaders noticed it wasn't there, so we went and updated it. So the way this is working, just giving you detail, all the things that go into a salary. You have the base salary, longevity, dual certification, national board, instructional specialist, team stipend, annuities, clothing allowance, all these various things going that are contractually obligated based on the bargaining agreements we have. We've summed them up by sort of role, teacher, administrator, non-certified, by school, give you an FTE count. Once again, I'll remind folks, FTE does not equal number of people. So that's why you have the 0.93 or 0.83. So we sum those up and we get to that total of just base salary of $10.3 million. And as you scroll to the right, you get the other additional payments. And that's how we get to the total where you see Easton District total of for the FY 21-22, that 10.6, that's the sum of all those totals. And we show the contrast, the FY 2021, and it's, you're seeing a 3.17% increase, just contractual obligations with no new status quo, no new staff. So that's good to know about what happens if we just, flip the switch to July 1. But as we know, there's always requests for new positions or new staff. So down below, we've added where the new things come in. So it's a grand total of 4.5 new positions that the buildings have requested. Obviously, these haven't been approved yet, but we just want to reflect their requests. That works out to be an additional $230,000 if those all 4.5 of those positions are brought on board. To Jeff, to one of your questions about how can we have longevity for a new position, I think Vicki gave the answer, but I'll share it for the rest of the board. If you see under the proposed teachers, there's a longevity payment. And Jeff's question was, how can we have longevity for a new person? We have an existing person that's a 0.5 and the request is to make them full-time. So that means they're currently receiving 0.5 of the longevity. If they went full-time, the other 0.5, their salary and longevity would come in. So that's how you have longevity for a proposed new. So that's that 0.5 you see in the FT there. I won't give the details of the rationale behind some of these positions because we'll save that for the January meeting, but we had budget meetings with the building leaders. They had some solid rationales for them. We just now have to find a way to pay for it or whether we can pay for it. But so we've included it here. If you go down to the bottom of the page there, you'll see we jumped to $10.8 million and a $465,000 increase if we assume status quo plus the 4.5 new positions. And that works out to almost a 4.5% increase. And I know that is, that's one of those things where you sort of, I imagine Jeff sitting back in his chair like, well, what's going to happen with that? But before you do that, Jeff, I'd ask you, let us get to explain the rationale behind it, because I had an initial reaction myself, and then I had to, today's my official 30th calendar day in the district. So I had to learn some details about how we do things here about class size. And I said, okay, if that's your sort of your mantra, then that makes sense. Because my initial reaction was like, well, why do you need that? And then I had, through learning through my short time here that we have a certain view about class sizes at the elementary level. If that's the case, then that number for an additional staff member may make some sense. So this is sort of the background detail that gets to that page that Rydell showed you with the sort of status quo then to the new numbers. All right, so we're going to jump here now to contracts. Some of these contracts on this sheet, it's shared with you all. Is it on that page, Rydell share with you? Because they're all in different categories. So I just wanted to sort of give an idea of some things we've signed on already. Now, Jeff had some additional questions here, which we've addressed, and I'll go through some of them. Jeff, the Barlow plow should not have been there, but I have a question about whether we should have plowing. Here's why. I noticed in the actuals for 1920, we had an expenditure for plowing in Easton. We did not budget any for this year. And tomorrow or today, we're having a major snowstorm. So my question is, was there some arrangement? I may being a neophyte, I may not know what arrangement was made for plowing, but we had an expenditure to 1920. We didn't budget anything for this year. And I got a major snowstorm coming today. So I'm wondering, am I going to have an expenditure again? If that's the case, then we should be budgeting for some sort of snow removal unless we've made some other arrangements that I'm not aware of. So Jeff,
yes. When we negotiated our custodial contract, they agreed to be responsible for the sidewalks around both SSCS and Helen Keller. Public Works does the parking lots, driveways, etc. The money that we had budgeted in the past was for an independent contractor to come in and remove the snow from the sidewalks. But in our last negotiation with the custodians, they agreed to take on that responsibility, and so that's why there isn't anything in the budget to cover that.
Oh, that makes sense. Generally speaking, in my experience, custodians are responsible for sidewalks up to the doors, and Public Works or someone else does the parking lot. So that makes sense then. Jeff had asked a question about the diesel fuel. That's yes for the buses. They're all for full-size buses, not the smaller vehicles. They use gas. So Jeff, to your question about the diesel fuel, that is for the buses. The heating oil that was on and we removed, I had another assumption. I know there are oil tanks at Samuel Staples, and I had my tour of Samuel Staples on Monday, and I learned that we have dual fuel capacity, and I assumed that, I didn't know that, but the tanks, apparently the oil tanks are full. So I removed that because I had an assumption that we may have to fill those up, but we don't, because my tour, Kim and staff informed me those oil tanks are full at this point, so we don't have to worry about it, but They have the dual fuel capacity between the gas and fuel.
Oh,
Oil, I should
so
say.
that's 119,000 for the good guys?
Yep. So that on the new sheet, you'll see it's off the list. Yes, it goes to the plus category. I think Jeff, you asked some questions about the FTEs. We'll save that a little later on because of the position discussion. The Brown and Brown, we should be expecting. Jeff also asked questions what we'll be getting in the Anthem projections. We are expecting those. They didn't have them last week when I had my conversation with Brown and Brown, but when we do get them, part of that report I shared with you all that Jeff was commenting on more information, you'll see an Anthem projection, a Brown and Brown projection, and then what we actually budgeted or they think we'll budget, so you can see the difference. And we have to make a choice about what number we're going to use. And from there, we run the risk of being right or being slightly wrong, whatever the case may be, and then we have to deal with the consequences. So just going back to this chart, we've got, these are some of our, like Power School, our whole sort of district runs off that Xerox or our copiers and printers. That includes CBS is also part of the Xerox. We have a payment for adult ed. That's an obligated payment since we don't have our own adult ed program. We have the Cooperative Service Managed Network, Naviance. These are all, the middle school uses Naviance, so that we use at the middle school and at the high school level, obviously. So ours would be Helen Keller. Foliet, these are all sort of software programs we need and use throughout the district. East River is the diesel fuel that we talked about. That's for the buses. First Student, we've already talked about medical insurance. So just this list alone is $4.2 million. Now, majority of that is the bus company and the medical insurance we already talked about. But as you can see, these things sort of add up. These are the things that help you sort of function as an organization, as a school district, help the children learn. So these are sort of the contracts my team was able to come up with, saying on and on. We have existing contracts. We need to proceed with these. Next, I'm going to jump over to what we call the Office of Parker reports. I don't know if Mr. Parker likes that, but so I'm going to start off with Samuel Staples.
Jeff, you try to get out, but we'll get back in.
It's
exactly. So
someone's grabbed my leg and they won't let go.
Exactly. So Vicki does a nice job of pulling this together. We had updated that position we talked about. We had a request for a para that came in one of our budget meetings. It wasn't reflected, so we updated that. So this is the detail for Samuel Staples. Now, for those who aren't familiar, the left-hand column shows what the budget that was proposed of this year. The middle shows the adjustments we've made today. Right-hand column is showing what we're proposing going forward. So you can see in Vicki's notes to the right where there's an increase. It's an interesting thing we do here, and we gotta think about this. We show offsets to grants in our salary within our operating budget. And that's unusual for me, so we got to think about that going forward. So it gives you sort of a skewed perspective because those offsets reduce the amount, whereas you're making an assumption that grant's always going to be there. So, which in most cases it is, but it's just in my experience, we've never done that. Grants are always kept separate, and if there's an FTE on a grant, it's just reflected on that in that fund account versus sort of commingling.
Well, Clarence, you will also see that at the end of our budget report, we also show more grants. So your point's well taken. It probably would make some sense to put them all in one place, and just reference where they, where they should be applied.
Yeah, so we're going to have an internal discussion about that. So just so we focus on the far right, you see. To answer your question about some of those new positions, it's all here in the, so you've got a 4th grade teacher that there's a request for an additional one. That was an initial one where I was like, well, why do we need that? You only got 21 kids a class. And I was quickly informed that 21 kids in the class in Easton is not acceptable. So that's why there's an additional 4th grade teacher requested there. As we scroll down here, we're going to convert one of our FTEs to an outsource using consultant. That shows a decrease there. There's a decrease of 2 in the behavior techs.
Yeah, Clarence, let's talk about that one. So that's a $96,000 savings on the salary line, but on the 114, which is other professional services, it's obviously going to be
correct,
an increase. And again, you probably have to go back to 2018-19, and of course, um, maybe many of those kids have already left the system. But what's an expectation for what our cost would be for that?
My understanding, talking to Vicky and Jen, is that they think they can get outsourced for less money than they're currently paying the person that's currently occupying that position. So I would have to defer to them about the rationale for that decision, but this is sort of what they're proposing to do, and that's why it's represented there.
Okay, I mean, it's fine. It's just that um, it it comes across as a $96,000 savings on the salary piece, but it's just gonna reappear, or
Correct.
some iteration of that is gonna
It's
reappear.
not going away. It's just being reshuffled to another
Yeah.
another silo, so to speak. You're absolutely correct. And
Okay,
for instance, maybe Jen can speak to this. I think, if I remember correctly, some of the BT decreases were because they were moving with the kids up to somewhere else. So it's bodies move around. So within the individual school's account, it may show a decrease, but it doesn't affect the overall budget.
Right.
I also just want to jump in and just kind of make put a caveat out there that some of the really drilling down into the details with positions, I just want us to be cautious about that, to make sure that our administrators have an opportunity to have conversations with some of the related staff members if there are some shifts that are the result of that. So
Sure.
Just want to be conscious of that.
So are there any questions about Samuel Staples?
Well, Staples is moving two of their two of their students that require basis paras to Keller, and that's why their basis paras are going down by 2.
I would defer to Jen on that to make sure, because I don't want to misspeak on what's going on in her program.
Actually,
Yeah, I
Jeff,
think that's right.
Hi, Jeff. I can jump in. This is Jen. You are correct. Is that what we're seeing happening is that as the kids are leaving Staples, and if they need additional adult support, not the person, the position goes with them to the next building. So I call, we're squeezing a little bit. So as we lose, as the kids graduate, their support will be needed at the next level.
Sure. I just wanted to be sure that it wasn't something where the child had left the district and therefore we had fewer BC basis.
We monitor it very closely, Jeff. I mean, we're always looking to see, can we reduce from a BT to a PAL? Can we pair up? Can we team up? But again, that's driven based on IEP and student needs.
Okay, thank you.
If no further questions on Samuel Staples, I'll go over to Helen Keller.
Hold on a second, Clarence. Hold on.
Okay.
Sorry. So one, increase in head count at the grade level. 2, basis teachers essentially going over to the other school, and we're dropping an occupational therapist in theory, but turning to a consultant. So one of the pages you flashed up earlier there had, essentially one net FTE at Samuel Staples, but it seems like we've got
grade. That was the grade 4 that you see on the screen there, Randy.
Yep, I see that. Aren't we really adding 1 and dropping 3, or not?
No, because if the 2 go to Helen Keller, our overall FTEs haven't changed because of those 2. They're just moving from Samuel Staples over to Helen Keller, so that's not a change in your FTEs.
Yeah.
And the occupational one we're dropping, I believe she's a contract employee, so she's not an FTE on our certified staff. So it's really just changing the outsourcing of it.
And healthcare?
What's your question on healthcare?
Is that person staying in our healthcare system as a consultant? I would assume not.
Correct. I don't know if she's in it currently.
That's fair. Okay.
All right, I'm going to hop over to Helen Keller. same format, existings on the far left, existing actual through December's in the middle, because obviously we make adjustments. So, because when you budget for a vacancy, we may hire someone who's less expensive or more expensive. So there'll be some variation there. Far right is what has been requested as of today's date for next year. You'll see there's a new position of a PE paraeducator that's been requested. That was the position that we had neglected to put in, which is now in there. I don't see the salary there, but my understanding it's a 16. I put it in on my thing. It's 16,176, I believe, would be the salary for that. So we got to go put that back in there. That the 16,000 is reflected on our previous pages with the salary total. So that 16,000 is there, just not showing up on this sheet. There's also the 0.5 we talked about increase is the social worker. So right now she's a 0.5. We want to try to propose her go to full 1.0. So that is the that longevity position we talked about earlier. And I think a lot of that social work needs is based on sort of the emotional, social well-being of the kids and the needs that they're seeing in the building. There's also an increase of one of special education paraeducators. I think that's also driven by specific needs of the children. There's a question?
I'm sorry. The basis BTs are going from 2 to 5?
Right. And that's the 2 that are coming from Staples over to Keller.
Staples.
I'm sorry?
That's correct. They are coming from Samuel Staples to Helen Keller. That is correct, Jeff.
But you're asking for one more than the 2 that we identified earlier. Is there a third that is coming over from Staples? Because we're moving from 2 bases to 5, so that's an increase of 3. 2 we just discussed are coming from Staples. Where's the third one coming from? Is this someone who moved in, or I would guess, but
well, the other thing that we also look at is to see if we can reduce students from meeting a BT to a PAL. So that also has to be factored in. So you also have to remember that we have students at Helen Keller that have BTs. I mean, I can certainly go back and do the math again, but that again, the number that you're seeing is not only the kids that are moving from Staples to Keller, but we also look at the kids at Keller to see if we could change their status from a BT to a PAL. I really can't get into the details of each student's IEP and what their needs are, but
well, of course.
Sure.
Again, it sounds like you're saying based on the needs of a student, you need an additional BT beyond the 2 that are being moved up. Does that sound right?
yes.
Okay.
And so, Clarence, to have this be consistent, should that row say increase of 3?
I think so, but I think from Vicky when she did it, it's a 1 new to the district,
Right.
but 3 to.
Okay.
I think she's viewing it as 1 new to the district, because you gotta understand when Vicky does this is 1 sheet, and I've broke it out into 2 sheets, so that's why it's showing 1.
I get it.
It makes more sense to me to just leave it as an increase in 1, because the increases are additional faculty above and beyond our total in both schools.
I agree, Jenny. Yep.
Clarence, can I ask you one question about the media specialist?
Of course.
Hold on, Jeff. Hold on. Before we go there,
Oh,
is the one? I'm just because we got 6 different pages here. I'm sorry, but
no.
is the one addition on the other page that we looked at 20 minutes ago? FTE, is it captured on that page? Because that's all I'm asking, I guess. Is the one basis?
The 1 addition is captured on the other page. Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, very good.
So Jeff, you were asking about the media specialist, I think?
Yes, I was asking about the salary. Well, where I was going to go was the salary, and I think you have down 70 something, 73.
I believe so, yes.
And looking at the contract, that would be a master's plus 10 years.
I would have to ask Vicky about that, but she makes certain assumptions, obviously depending on you hire the person, but she makes an assumption as an average, and I think that's what she's assumed.
Okay. I'm just making a comment. That's a lot of experience, and I would wonder if there's the same talent that might not be quite as expensive.
So Jeff, I think
let's not limit our hiring pool just yet.
so I will also say that one of the in a lot of cases when you are hiring a media specialist, you are hiring a individual who has spent some time in the classroom first, and so in a lot of cases they're coming with more years of experience in comparison to someone who hasn't obviously spent time in the classroom before that current position.
Yeah, and I get that. I just 10 years is 10 years on the scale is pretty substantial. That's all.
So Jeff, remember, it is a plug number until an actual individual is hired, and it's a proposed plug number. So I wouldn't get too wedded to that figure.
Okay.
It's got to be approved in the budget, and then you got to find someone, and they may be lower, maybe higher. It all depends on who they select to take the role. Are there any questions about Helen Keller?
Is that head count on the other sheet as an additional FTE?
Yes, you see there was an additional 4.5. There was one at Staples, 3.5 at Helen Keller. So yes.
All right, maybe I'm looking at an old sheet. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So Randy, the old sheet had 3.5. There was a para that wasn't showing up because it came after our meeting. We sent the new one out today, and it shows 4.5.
Okay, fair enough.
4.5 total, but 3.5 out of that is
Helen Keller.
Randy, you're asking, I'm sorry, just to clarify, you're asking if the media center specialist is included in that 4 point whatever.
It is.
Well, I'm looking at the Helen Keller sheet that is really, really small print and colors. And I'm squinting at it, but there's an increase in the media specialist, just so we're all on the same page. An increase of a half of the social worker, an increase in a basis, and an increase in a para, essentially.
Yes.
And that adds up to 3.5, I think.
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, the PE. You mentioned the PE para early on.
Yep.
Is that another FTE or that's?
Yeah, the PE para, the basis PT, you've got the media specialist, and you've got the half the social worker. There's your 3.5.
Isn't that 4.5?
No, no. Para.
Yep.
PE para, media specialist, BT. That's 3. Half a social worker. I have 4 fingers, but I can't cut my finger in half, so it's 3.5.
Okay.
And then you've got the one 4th grade teacher at same Staples. That's how you get to the 4.5.
Yep. Yeah.
So to your point, there are 4 bodies, but it's 3.5 FTEs.
Yep. And the PE para, you ballparked it at what was it, 16 or?
16,176, I believe.
Yep. Okay.
And obviously you're ballparking the 4th grade teacher at 75.
Yeah. And all those numbers are in the numerical numbers from the first page.
Right.
Vicky pulled this together. Vicky wasn't planning on doing this until next month, but we leaned on a little bit to get it done. And then we had to go add the PE para. So we got, we'll make some adjustments as we go. We do thank her for her, pulling it out in 24 hours.
I'm sorry, what was the allocation for the additional fourth grade teacher at SSES?
75,000.
I'm sorry, Jeff, one more time.
75,033. Which again is a master's plus 10.
I think that's
Oh,
right.
I see it. Okay, I see it on the magnifying glass page.
Yep. This is why I like electronic version. You can magnify it.
Yeah. Zoom to infinity.
Yep. So yeah, it's right here, the 750333. So that's what I had, John, to share with you all based on the requests, and hopefully that satisfies what you're looking for. And I know I had sent additional information, the Brown and Brown stuff. I didn't. If you want to go into detail about that, that's fine. But that's a real in-depth sort of thing. So I don't know if you want to do that tonight or not. But to your original questions, this is what I had prepared for your original question.
Unless anyone else wants to dive in on the Brown and Brown stuff, I'm fine to move on.
Well, John, I would just have one observation about that.
Please.
And that is that our claims after 5 months are tracking better than our claims for 5 months last year. And last year was one of the best years in recent memory. And so if we were to continue down that road, and I think we probably need December, January, and maybe even February numbers to take a harder look at that. The recommendation that they have to go from, I think it's 2.6 to 2.8 would not be necessary, and those could be dollars that we wouldn't have to spend on healthcare. That those are dollars that we could spend on kids.
Mr. Chairman, may I be able to respond to that, please?
Please do.
So, Jeff, I understand that rationale logic, but there's a caveat you have to understand. Comparing last fall to this fall, there's this thing called COVID that's changed things a little bit. So last fall, people were doing on their deductible on their dime in the fall. In the spring, after they have had their deductible, it would have come to us. But yes, last spring, we were in a lockdown, so folks weren't going to the doctors. So
Right.
You see the comparison from last fall to this fall may not be apples to apples. And then, yes, last year was your best year because nobody was going to the doctor for half the year. So if you look at the claims history, you were averaging 2 million plus in claims per year, and all of a sudden last year dropped down to 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
what happened in that year? Well, you've had half the year where people just weren't going to the doctor. We start this year off, same situation. Now, you'll notice if you look at the claims, we were low in August and July. Everyone started feeling good. Everything we're past this, and people start going out more. Claims went up in September, October, November. And guess what's happened? We are having a surge because people are going out more. So what may happen in the spring is now we're in this large surge period. Once again, may not be going to the doctor. So it gives us a false sense of our claims history just because people's access to medical care they're not doing elective surgeries. They're not going out breaking their bones playing sports because there is no sports. It's all these sort of things that lead into that. So Jeff, I would agree with you, but I would just ask to have that caveat that it's not an apples to apples comparison given that the impact COVID has had on healthcare.
And I agree. It's just simply an observation that we're 5 months in. If we waited and got 3 more months of information, then we would, I think, be at a relatively safe place. Obviously, the vaccine and people are now starting to get vaccinated, but we're also, I've certainly heard enough in the media that's talking about that this will take months before everyone gets covered. So people may still be reluctant, and until that happens.
And Jeff and Clarence, I think it's probably even more than just observing for a few more months of our own data. I wonder if our sort of healthcare partners can help us to do a little analysis of what was the trend, 2017, 18, 19, 20 of the amount of procedures that were happening broadly in society the number of people sort of seeking, people getting broken bones and things like that, people having surgeries, like all that stuff. If we have an understanding of that and we see it sort of bears out what you're talking about, Clarence, then it would suggest like we probably shouldn't try to, skimp on that number. But if it says, actually, it looks like we're relatively in the same place, then.
Well, here's my sort of 50,000 foot view, John. If you look at that monthly healthcare report, it goes back 4 or 5 years, and every year except for last year was in excess of $2 million.
Yeah.
Every single year was. Now, granted, you change programs.
Exactly. It's hard to attribute that.
Yeah.
So I like if what we're suggesting is people are seeking healthcare at a lower rate as a function of COVID, as opposed to the market forces we introduced by way of switching the system that they're operating.
I think it's both.
It absolutely could be, but I think we could sort of tease out what percentage of that is COVID by way of just understanding broadly in society. And I think our friends at Anthem or elsewhere could probably give us some stats.
We can make an inquiry.
Yeah.
John, we've also talked a little bit about this in terms of, yes, there might be concern for a return or a surge, but just that it's kind of physically impossible to expect that folks are going to like double and triple and quadruple down on sort of like a catch-up schedule.
Yeah.
So I mean, to your point of seeking sort of a professional counsel on this, I absolutely would like to hear that. But taking that long view, it wouldn't be possible within that amount of time for people to kind of catch up on and make up for all of those procedures that didn't occur because of COVID.
Yeah,
so it's probably going to fall somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I just want to be careful of using words like skimp on things. I mean, I think we're trying to make a logical, reasonable take a logical or regional approach that might result in actually a lower percentage going to the Board of Finance if we can, shift things from one place to another and open up a little bit of wiggle room for, a needed FTE at one of the schools. We're not trying to consciously, take a risk where healthcare is concerned. We're just looking at the big picture.
Right. Yeah. Good.
We're going to have a couple more months, and I think by my math, our reserve budget or reserve balance right now, if we had deposited 5 months of what we projected or 5 months of our budget, would be closer to 900,000 than 500,000. So even though our reserve budget appears to have gone down, the reality is it should have gone up a couple $100,000. We just haven't deposited our normal. We periodically deposit in it. We don't just deposit every month willy-nilly. So Clarence, you may disagree with that, but that's my take on it, because we're budgeting 216 and we haven't had 216 per month as expenditure. So
correct.
So we'll have another couple months, but if the reserve is $1 million, I don't see us budgeting 2.8, but I don't want to jump to that conclusion yet. So.
Okay. Thanks, Randy.
John, can I ask a general question about just sort of the overall percentages? And apologies in advance if I sort of missed this in the beginning. The number I would like to walk away with or come to the conclusion with here is, if we were with these documents and numbers as is, what percentage would we be walking in the door with? Contractual obligations plus the additional FTEs. Is it the 10% that was on the previous page? Is it 4.49 that's at the bottom of this?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would be what's the combination?
It's 4.5.
It's 4.5 just for the contractual obligations plus the new positions. That's a 4.5% increase if you do the status quo staff plus if you accepted all 4.5 of those new positions, it'd be 4.5%.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And the 4.5 includes kind of the larger healthcare number, the 2.8.
No.
Right.
No,
No,
that's
it
zero
doesn't.
healthcare.
That's
healthcare.
just what that bottom page is showing is right now. Just that doesn't include the substitutes, but just our employees. We're budgeting $10.36 million. If we take that same employees, apply their step increases and general wage increases, add those 4.5 new positions, you need an additional $465,000. That's a 4.49% increase. That does not factor in the increase for the healthcare or the bus. The bus, we know it's additional $24,000. That may not be a big change. Healthcare, depending what number we pick, would also change how that moves. But that 4.49% is 60% of the budget.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not 4.5% on a $17 million budget, Devin. It's 4.5% on
it's
$10 million.
4.5, right?
Budget.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. Yeah, it's 4.5 increase in that, like 60% of the budget that is people.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
We don't know the other numbers yet, so I can't give you an overall, because we have those numbers have to be determined. So that's why we can't sort of say, but we know that 60% of the budget is going up either 3.17% or 4.49, depending on, or somewhere in between, depending on what decisions are made.
Clarence,
so to add those extra 4.5 people, it's 1.3-ish, 3.2 or so percent.
Correct.
Well, of the it's of the salary total. If we did all of this with a 4.49% change on the salary line, the total impact to the budget would be 2.73%.
Assuming that everything else is flat.
Assuming that everything else is flat. That's right.
Yeah, and that also, just be trend. This page is not showing Social Security payments. This is just strictly salary payments to the employees. It's not benefit. So to Jeff's point, you're talking the 2+% impact on the overall budget.
Mm-hmm.
Just for those salaries and salary related items.
And to give you, to put some, and to put a little different perspective on this, when we did this, we did the status quo salary last year. The salary impact increase on the entire budget was 1.93. So we're talking about, an increase over certainly what we asked for last year.
We didn't have 4.5 new heads. So.
Right. So if you were
because we had cut them before, so we're still in the restoration. Game here,
some of those
come back to where we were before.
That's right.
Some of those 4.5 are being classified as restoring positions that have been cut previously.
Right.
Yeah, right. Some of the building leaders. These are restorations of previously held positions.
Yep. Jenny, did you have anything else that you wanted to dig in on these?
It was just more of a comment or just kind of a sharing about sort of the way that I think, I can't even say all of us, about half of us, right, are sort of used to digesting these numbers. So when I was, and thank you, Jeff, for mentioning, kind of the impact on the overall budget, because I think for me, that's the number that have so much experience focusing on.
Sure.
That, it's taking some time to adjust to seeing this. And I'm sure it was presented in some way before as a percentage of just the salary portion, like the 4.49 is not overall budget impact. It's a percentage increase of this specific component of it. But as we're moving through this, I mean, I can only speak for me personally, it would be helpful to sort of always come back to that number of our, right, so this is just related to salaries, but if we went this route, we would be looking at a 1 point whatever, 2 point whatever over the total budget, because that's really what we end up coming down to, trying to move the needle on.
Exactly.
I appreciate that. Right now, we're just too early in the stages. I don't think, my understanding is this is sort of a new approach of getting this sort of early information. We haven't fully fleshed out the budget yet, so I can't give you an overall increase because we have things we haven't even resolved this yet. We just literally had a budget meeting yesterday, so we're still sort of working on that.
But Jenny, I want to jump in and just kind of tag on to what you said. I mean, I think that there are people who live and breathe numbers and tables all of the time. I am not one of those people. And so I really appreciate being able to see things visually. And I think that, going from this presentation into, preparing for January, one of the things that I want to do is that we sit down as a team and think about how do we communicate this visually, particularly for people in the public who, this is not what they do all day long. I mean, so I think that will be helpful. And I think that being able to parse out how we are looking at these as pieces of the broader picture, I think that'll be important for us going forward and really laying that out. So just know that's something that I recognize too, and we'll work on.
Jenny, when I've shared this with John and I think some others, when you see a budget presentation from me, there will be significantly more charts and graphs illustrating changes and things than you've seen in the past. So this was all just sort of in response to John's request last week. And like I say, we're still inputting that data into the budget, building it. So we're in no position to be telling you what the overall increase is, and because we're still adding stuff. As of like we had a meeting with Jen just yesterday, so we haven't really finalized everything. That's why I just wanted to focus on the salary part, because the question that was proposed was, what is the status quo, assuming the new agreed upon salary? What would it look like given that 6% of the budget? It gives you a good indication of what could be coming. Healthcare, transportation, and salaries, those are your three largest components. So we can get an idea what those are. At least it gives a general direction, which way the wind's blowing, so to speak.
Gretchen?
I wanted to thank you for that because I actually feel like I'm pretty new here, and I feel like this was very clear for me. So I really appreciate, and I appreciate what Jenny's saying too, because I think we do have to go to them, and that overall number is definitely something that becomes important. But I think for this time period, the way you laid it out was very helpful for me.
Yeah. Thank you for all the work that you did in preparation for this. Also, just so everybody knows, when Clarence shared with us, hey, here's what a budget presentation looks like, that I've prepared in the past. I didn't tell him, but I already knew what it looked like. When we were interviewing Clarence, I went and looked at all the budgets that he had prepared, and I said, I want that. I want something that is that clear. So
I appreciate John, because when the first day in office, they dropped this binder on my desk, and I was like, well, what the hell is that? And that's the budget. I'm like, I was literally looking around like I thought it was like candid camera, like, what, you gotta be kidding me.
Good. All right. Any additional questions for Clarence? Dr. Harrison, did you have more items you wanted to sort of jump into, or
no,
for next month? Okay. Mm-hmm. Any other questions before we leave? Randy?
One question. We have a full tank of oil at Samuel Staples. That's the first I've heard of that. Why?
It just happened very recently, Randy. I was visiting Samuel Staples on Friday, and apparently, I'm not even sure where the oil came from because I asked who paid for it. Apparently, someone, I don't know if it was for a bus contract, they had too much diesel, and since the burner will burn diesel fuel and oil fuel is basically the same except for dye, they dumped all the diesel into the oil tanks. And I knew there were some tanks there, and I was thinking we had to fill them up. But on my tour on Friday, they said no, they just got filled. I'm like, filled with what? And like, where'd it come from? And it's like, I had this knowledge since Friday, so it's sort of, I'm still trying to figure out like, why do we have so much diesel left over, and all these sort of things. But
I think isn't that from last year?
Fuel number 2 apparently in the tanks at Samuel Staples.
I think it was from last year, right? We had a huge amount in storage, and we actually had to pay to get rid of a bunch of it. So I think we maybe popped off.
Well, that was the diesel fuel for the buses. Hopefully, they didn't put diesel fuel into the tanks at Samuel Staples. Holy cow!
Well, it's the same thing as Clarence said. It's the same thing. It's exact same.
The only difference is a dye. That's the only.
Yeah, it's the same thing. But
and the dye is just for tax purposes, so the state of Connecticut can know how much with taxes. So it's the same exact thing. So if they put it there, it's good to have. And look, in reality, the oil burns better. It's a better source for cold days. So it, actually creates more heat. So having it there, you might be able to use it on really cold days, but it just, I didn't know there was tanks there until Friday. And I was like, wait a minute, if there's tanks, you got to always, and I've had districts where we had the same situation, but you always top them off just in case if something happens, there's work on the gas line, whatever, you want to make sure you have fuel. So I was assuming that we'd have to go fill them up, but then I found out we had this sort of gratis, not gratis, we paid for it, but fuel that was put in there that took that off the list of items for me.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just wondering if Dr. Harrison can see the snow coming down in the window behind me.
You know, Jenny, I was going to tell you to have Andrew just turn out all the lights, and then we could say, well, you know, here's the power outage that we've been expecting, and, you know, boom, there it is.
I've got
Do
my
we all need to get
chainsaw
our
ready
children
for
to
the
like
secret
come
branch.
into the Zoom
I like
and
that.
start building snow people? Yeah.
Jenny, I'll meet you wherever you want to meet to start cutting down telephone poles. Let's go. Let's make this snow day happen.
Well, yeah, we just need somebody to help us figure out, you know, like exactly which tree and which line that won't affect houses, but just the right number of buildings. I don't know.
All right. Very good. That moves us on to public comment. I'm sorry. I see
Allison.
Sponhoff. Yep.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Oh, perfect. Yes, go for it.
Allison Bonoff, Gregory Farm Road. I have to say that I'm beside myself to hear board members trying to influence the superintendent to call a snow day in public on a recorded session. I just want to remind us all of a few things. John, you may find this amusing because I think you may. There's a 7-day vacation coming with no homework, I can guarantee it, and with no projects due. School ends before 2:30, so have them go out then. Some school doesn't start until 10. Have them go out before. You can drive by Helen Keller, you can see everybody close together, and you can see the COVID spreading. If that's what we want, that's what we're going to get. Yet we all talk about and are so concerned about slippage. We cannot have this both ways. We began school late for the teachers. What about the parents? We all don't have government jobs. Some of us don't have jobs. This is not a place to kid about this. We talk about budget increases for what? Salary, longevity. They have the entire summer off, and we are asking for a snow day. I'm ashamed that this is what we are teaching our children, to cut classes, to send friendly notes to teachers, and for them to allow this. There is a time to play and there's a time to work. This is the time to get some work done. The budget said nothing about robotics, said nothing about teaching STEM. None of those FTEs are noted. We talked about class size. Maybe Clarence could tell us, I think, what they did in Stanford. I think that's where he came from. Class size, really, we need to talk about that. We need to look at the hard numbers, not what Dr. McMorran presented. We need to look at hard numbers here. A 4% increase, whatever the numbers you want to cut it up as. What are we paying for? Snow days? No improved education means no to the budget. I implore you to keep school on when you can. If you say you're just going to have it made up in the spring, I've talked to Dr. Hugo about this last spring, when we bring bulletin boards down, when we return books earlier and earlier and earlier each year. We are paying high taxes and we expect a solid education. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, board member comment? Devin.
I just want to make a quick comment. I did some just quick research on like houses sold and property values and information, and just noticed that over the past, I think many of us at the very beginning of the pandemic, March, April, expected, kind of some really detrimental things for our town in terms of property values plummeting or no one moving into Easton. And that has actually not happened. There's been a significant increase in houses sold, especially in kind of a price range that was not moving prior to the pandemic. The increase in average sales is up 32%. The median sale price is up almost 25%. We've sold 34% more houses year over year. And so the reason I'm saying that is because what we see is like families moving into town, potentially an increase in students and a need for more investment in our schools, which is, pretty starkly different than I think what we heard at our last board meeting from a representative of the Board of Finance. And so I just want to point out that we're seeing, families moving into town because they recognize the quality of our schools. They recognize the quality of having a community school feel where we have two schools and the focus on strong education, getting to know your teachers, getting to know your neighbors, getting to know your superintendent and your chief operating officer, right, and your head of curriculum. And that matters. And I think investing in our schools, and I love to see that you guys are actually asking for an increase in personnel to focus on things like our kids' mental health and emotional well-being. So seeing a half FTE for social support or mental support, as well as focusing on special education, which we know draws families into town. So I hope we really think about what our kids need. I know that is the goal. And I see it already in this first step in the budget, but just continuing to encourage that we are seeing an increase actually in people moving in town, and an increase in our property values, an increase in the amount of people who are paying taxes. We heard that now houses that were sitting on the market with taxes unpaid for years sold, and we have now an increase in our unassigned fund balance, which was already inflated. So I just want to encourage, as we think about what our kids actually need from the learning loss that was just eloquently stated from one of our community members, that there is a need to meet our students where they are at based on some of the challenges they have faced and our teachers have faced throughout this COVID pandemic. So thank you for your first step, and I look forward to seeing more.
Thank you, Devin. Any additional board member comment?
I do, Jeff. Go ahead, Jenny.
I think you have the floor, Randy.
All right, then. I'm going to sort of flip the page back to our last meeting a little bit, and I want to be supportive, I think we all do, of everything the administration and the schools do. And as it relates to schools being open, schools being closed, I want to be supportive of that final decision. For me, and for me to be in that position, I as a board member, I need more information, I think. And I know everybody's pulling at the administration for information these days, but and it's data, and it's specific data as best we can. And it stems from one end of the spectrum, and no disrespect to Mr. Cooper last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. But I care, but I don't really care what's going on at the general public level in Westport, as a for instance. I do, because I know our teachers don't all live in town and they come from other places, and that generates spread. But the point is, I want more specific information, if it's available, on school spread in our schools, in neighboring schools. I mean, it seems like a bunch of our neighbors are still open and we're not. But I understand the reasons that we made and the decisions that Dr. Harrison made to close schools sort of preemptively, because of all the things that we saw and the data that we saw. I totally understand that. And frankly, I'm okay with that. We get through the holidays. We really need to have, I want the board to be a little bit more involved in the conversation going into January on what we're doing. And for me, it's about data, because I think there's some, not so silent harm that's going on, not just here, but around the country, where schools are closed. And I'm very concerned about that. And, I want to do everything we can to get kids back in school safely. We all do. So for me, it's more data that needs to be provided if it's possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Jenny?
Am I good to go? I stand behind my comments about the snow day. I don't think it was disrespectful. I don't think it was irresponsible. I've been an educator for over 20 years, and I think that I have a qualified experience perspective on fatigue in especially our youngest learners, on the difference between the attention required and the impact on mental health of both our faculty and the children and the young people in our district from prolonged distance learning. And I don't think it is a far stretch to say that at this point, after months and months of the back and forth, that children outside tomorrow and parents not going, trying to, the competing attentions of a 5 or a 6-year-old or an 8 or a 9-year-old sitting at a computer tomorrow trying to attend to distance learning while there's a foot of snow outside, it is a far reach to say that that might be a positive thing for their mental health. I also don't think it necessarily needs to be a one-size-fits-all decision. There's certainly concern at the high school with AP courses and progress towards, the midterm date and culminating activities at the end of a semester. There could be asynchronous learning going on at the middle or the high school level for the, required number of hours a day, while the elementary school students are maybe not, doesn't need to be in session. The same way distance learning doesn't need to be a one-size-fits-all for every grade level and for every school. Dr. Harrison is going to make his decision regardless of my making a plea at the beginning from my own personal observations and experiences and general concern for the mental health of the kids in town. And I certainly want to make sure that any ire or aggravation with my comments at the beginning is specifically and only directed at me and not taken to be spread as a comment about the Board of Education of Easton overall. And I'm happy to speak to anyone either in person, on the phone, or via email, following the meeting if that is desired by anyone in the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Any additional comment? Okay. Dr. Harrison, anything that you want to add?
No, I just wanted to just close by saying thank you for giving us the opportunity to kind of kick off this discussion around the budget, and just to give sort of a little bit of a preview as to things that we'll talk about in January, because I think that will really get at the heart of sort of where many of our priorities are. We'll talk about how we respond to some of the gaps in learning with some ideas around summer programming and what that can look like. And that's related to the focus on academic excellence. So thinking about those ABC goals. And then for building future-ready learners or building a caring community, really looking at our DEI initiative and what are some of our needs in Easton and Reading related to that, and what are some budget implications. And then the last, creating future-ready learners. That's where we'll get into kind of a focus on technology integration, STEM, and rethinking some ideas around what learning looks like with our students in the classroom. So those are all of the three big areas that I'm excited for us to talk about and to be able to get input from the board and really think about the direct impact on our students.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. We'll look forward to having those conversations, as you said, in January as we approach that phase of the budget process. Excellent. Well, I think at this point, we would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you,
Second.
Jeff. I think Devin seconded it. I'm going to say all in favor. That looks like unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a very pleasant evening.